The pod cracked open, and Cale Dreven hit the floor before he remembered he had legs. He lay chest down on the deck plating, breathing hard, and tried to locate himself in time. The lights above him were wrong, emergency amber, half flickering, and the corridor was not one he recognized from this angle. His name was Cale Dreven. He was 24 years old. He was a systems technician aboard the survey vessel Marin's Reach. He was alive. He noted this in the flat, methodical way of a man whose brain was still arriving. And then he pressed his palms flat against the deck and held on while the rest of him caught up. The alarm was a low-maintenance tone, not the full emergency shriek. The automated system had noticed an unscheduled cryo-wake. He got to his feet. The pod bay held 12 slots. He checked each status panel without touching the release handles. 9 green, 2 amber with faulted release mechanisms, and 1 red. His. He stood at the red panel and thought about what it meant that 11 people were still asleep, and only he was standing in the amber half-dark with his breath fogging and his hands still cold from cryo-fluid. He went to find out why. The first corridor terminal gave him his position on the ship's map, which matched his memory, and then gave him the navigation archive's last logged position, which did not. He had heard of the Verath Exclusion the way every technician in the border sectors heard of it. A zone of deep space the Cartographic Authority had marked with its highest restriction code, a region where surveys did not return, and the records went thin in the specific way records go thin when someone has sealed the entries that once existed there. He had filed it under distant things that did not concern him. The archive was showing coordinates inside the exclusion. The transit distance from their assigned survey target was 4 times what the mission plan had specified. He did not panic. Panic was not on his list. He breathed until his chest stopped feeling tight, and then he started moving. The bridge was 2 levels up and 160 meters forward. He had walked that route hundreds of times in 11 months aboard this ship. He walked it now, and the vessel was wrong in ways he cataloged as he went. The mess hall hatch stood open. Inside, 12 meal portions sat on the tables cold and untouched, dispensed 4 days ago by the galley timer. He stopped and counted them and then kept moving. At deck junction 3, a resonance began in the bulkheads, not mechanical, not a system fault, a pattern below easy hearing, felt more in the chest than registered by the ear. The ship's structural diagnostics, when he ran them from the junction panel, returned clean. The resonance continued anyway, patient, recursive, present in everything. He filed it under things he did not understand yet. The bridge hatch opened on his first try. The main viewport showed the exclusion's anomalous optical quality, that sourceless spread of light the authorities' public files described as navigational interference, too even, without origin, as if the light itself had forgotten where it came from. He sat at the navigator's station and pulled up the mission log. The log had not been sealed. He had been afraid it would be. 9 weeks ago, Marin's Reach had been diverted from its assigned survey run by an authority priority transmission, carrying override codes that no vessel commander could refuse. The transmission had instructed the crew to proceed to coordinates inside the Verath Exclusion and conduct a passive survey of an anomaly-designated V7. The full crew had gone into cryosleep for the transit, rotating 2-person watches through the approach. He had not been assigned to any watch rotation. He had slept through everything. 4 weeks of passive survey logs followed the arrival on station. Technical notes from Chief Surveyor Idris Salm, precise and clipped, growing shorter as the weeks progressed. The final entry was 9 days ago. 3 words. It responded. Confirmed. Then nothing for 9 days. Then the galley dispensing 12 meals 4 days ago that nobody came to eat. Then this morning, his pod. He read the log twice, then found a subfolder in the mission archive labeled Personal, SOLN-I, which should have been locked to his technician credentials but was not. The restriction had been removed. Recently. Deliberately. One file inside, an audio recording, he played it. Idris Salm's voice was controlled and technical with something underneath it that was not quite fear and not quite wonder, the register of a mind pressed right against the edge of its certainties. She said, "Kale, I know you're awake because your pod fault triggered an alert I configured. The rest of the crew is in cryosleep. They're fine. I placed them there because V7 requires minimal signal interference and 11 conscious human minds produce too much of it. I left you because your pod was already faulting, and a manual extraction would have been harder than letting the malfunction complete. I need you to understand what we have here before you do anything." A pause, her breathing. V7 is not dangerous. I want to be precise about that because the rest of what I'm about to say could suggest otherwise. It is the oldest structure we have ever confirmed, and it is not dangerous. It is a record-keeping system, entirely passive. It does not act. It observes and it archives. It has been archiving this sector of space for longer than any estimate I can give you with confidence. When we arrived, it observed us. When I confirmed genuine two-way exchange, when I confirmed that my instrument emissions were being answered rather than merely reflected, it transmitted a summary of its contents to me. I have been working with that summary for 9 days. Another pause, longer this time. The summary is a log of every crew that has come through this sector since the Authority's exclusion designation was first established. 700 years, 14 vessels. V7 has a complete record of all of them, what they found, what they did, and why none of them returned to file a report. I have now read 12 of those 14 records. I am not transmitting them on an open channel. I am staying awake to complete the exchange, and I need more time. The crew is sleeping because I need them to sleep. You are awake because this ship needs a functioning technician. The maintenance list is attached to this file. Run it in order. Do not transmit anything outside the vessel, no beacon, no log ping, no position update. If we break the link with V7, it will not reestablish. Trust me on that. He sat with the recording until it ended. Then he pulled up the attached maintenance list. It was exactly what she had described. Standard tasks, nothing unusual, every item something he had done 100 times on this vessel or one like it. He read through the list once, recognized each entry, and picked up his toolkit. He worked through the ship for 7 hours. The resonance was present in every section at the same low frequency, neither stronger near the hull nor weaker in the core, spread through the vessel uniformly, as though V7's transmission did not travel through steel the way sound travels through steel, but through something the steel happened to be made of. He stopped at junction 3 and pressed his palm flat against the bulkhead and felt the sequence move through his hand. Regular, unhurried, the pulse of something that had been transmitting long enough that transmission had become indistinguishable from existing. Not threatening, not summoning, simply present, the way very old things are present when waiting and being have merged into one state. He stopped flinching at it after the 3rd hour and let it be background. He found Salm in the aft observation bay at the end of his first maintenance pass, bent over the primary analysis console with a headset in and 12 days of printed notes arranged in careful columns around her workstation. She had not heard him arrive. He stood at the hatchway and watched her work for a moment, the steadiness of her stylus, the way she paused on a column of figures and then continued without hesitation, and understood what 9 days of unbroken concentration looked like from the outside. She had the specific quality of a person who has found exactly what she came to find and will not stop until it is finished. He said her name quietly. She turned around. Her face had the brief expression of someone returning to ordinary scale from something much larger. She said, "Maintenance done." "Working through it," he said. She nodded and turned back to the console. He crossed the bay and looked at her display. The V7 transmission ran on the left panel, structured and dense in a format he did not recognize and had never seen in any record or training database. Her analysis occupied the right panel, translated fragments, interpretations, questions written in the margins of her printed notes. He said, "How much longer?" She said, 2 days, 3 at most. The last 2 records are the most complete. I want everything." He said, "What happens after?" She said, "We take the archive home. We give it to the authority, and we make the case that what V7 contains needs to be formally read by people with the authorization to act on what they find." He said, "And if the authority seals it?" She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the transmission, the density of 14 records accumulated over 7 centuries, waiting inside a structure that had needed no maintenance, no power source, no crew, and then she said, "They might, but V7 will still be here. It will keep the record regardless of what the authority does with ours. It has been doing this longer than any institution any species has ever built, and it will be doing it after. The information does not stop being true because someone seals the file." He did not have a better answer than that. He suspected she did not either, and that shared acknowledgement was its own kind of resolution. The kind that does not comfort you but settles you, the way recognizing something immovable settles a person who has been pushing against it. There were things too large for one ship's crew to carry home complete. You carried what you could. He finished the maintenance rotation that evening and made food from the galley, actually warm, the first warm thing in the mess hall since those 4-day-old untouched portions, and brought a share back to Salm without comment. She ate without looking away from the console. He sat in the observation bay and listened to the resonance in the hull, and thought about 14 vessels in 700 years, and what the record of each one would say, and found that the thinking did not frighten him the way it would have that morning. That morning he had hit the floor of an amber-lit corridor in forbidden space with no memory of how he got there, and no information about what had happened to his crew. He had worked the problem one step at a time, terminal to log to message to toolkit to maintenance list to this chair in this bay with the resonance in the hull and the food and the woman who was almost finished, and the ship had held, and the crew was alive, and the work was nearly done. Whatever V7 was, whatever those 14 records contained, whatever the authority would eventually decide to do about any of it, none of that was his to carry alone, and he had not been asked to carry it alone. He had been asked to keep the ship running. He was keeping the ship running. That was enough for tonight. On the 3rd day, Salm completed the record. She transferred the full archive to a sealed data core, logged the transfer under her own authorization codes, and then sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling without speaking for a long time. He let her look. When she finally moved, it was to lift the headset carefully from her head and set it on the console beside her. She said, "Done." He said, "Do you want to wake the crew?" She said yes. The pod bay cycled in order, 9 green status pods first, then the 2 amber faults on manual override, both releasing cleanly. 12 people stood in the amber corridor light, cold and disoriented, and Salm told them where they were and what had happened and what they were carrying home. The corridor was quiet while she spoke. Cale stood at the back and watched their faces change as the scale of it arrived. They were the 15th crew to cross into the Verath Exclusion in 700 years. They were the first to be leaving with something other than silence. On the transit out, the resonance in the hull faded on the 2nd day. As the distance from V7 crossed the threshold the transmission could not bridge, and the ship went quiet in the way ships go quiet when a background note has simply stopped. He moved through the corridors in the ordinary silence and recognized without ceremony what the experience had done to him. He had woken disoriented in forbidden space with nothing except his name and his training and a maintenance list, and he had worked the problem until the problem was workable. He had not broken. The ship had not broken. Sanity was not a feeling, it was a practice, the discipline of moving to the next task and then the next until the shape of things became clear enough to navigate. He had practiced it for 4 days in the dark and it had held, and that was something he would carry forward whether the authority classified the archive or not. At the exclusion boundary, the restriction beacons were transmitting their unchanged designations: patient, oblivious, exactly as they had been for 700 years. He watched the last one recede on the aft display until it was a single amber point in the dark. Then it was gone. The sky ahead was the ordinary sky. He opened the ship's personal log, the one that would not be sealed because it was not the mission record, and wrote one line. V7 is still there. The record is still being kept. He closed the log and went back to work.